There's a reason Carl Jung called the human psyche a house with many rooms. Most of us, he believed, live only in one of them, never realizing the doors that remain locked inside our own souls. But nowhere did his vision of the human mind become more mysterious or more controversial than in what he called the anima and animus, the feminine and masculine energies buried deep within every man and woman. When Jung spoke about women, he wasn't speaking of flesh and blood alone. He was speaking of something older, something archetypal, a presence that lives in the depths of a man's unconscious, the image of the eternal feminine. It's not about women themselves, but rather the way a man perceives them, the way she haunts his imagination, his dreams, his desires. And if he's not careful, Jung warned, that image can become more real to him than any living woman could ever be. It's a strange thought, isn't it? That what many men fall in love with isn't truly a woman, but the reflection of their own inner longing, a projection, a mirror. Jung called it the anima projection, and to him it was one of the most dangerous illusions a man could ever face. Imagine this: a man meets a woman, and something within him stirs. She feels like destiny, like the answer to a question he never knew he was asking. Her laugh, her glance, the way she listens, it all feels familiar, as if he's known her across lifetimes. But what he doesn't see is that what moves him so deeply isn't her essence, it's his own soul speaking through her face. His anima, his inner feminine, has awakened, and instead of meeting the woman as she truly is, he's meeting a phantom woven from his own unconscious desires. Jung said that when this projection takes hold, the woman becomes the carrier of a man's soul. He idealizes her, elevates her, worships her, but in doing so, he also traps her and himself in a fantasy that cannot endure. Because the moment she fails to live up to that divine image, the illusion collapses. Love turns to bitterness, devotion turns to resentment, and the man is left shattered, not by her betrayal, but by the death of the ideal he himself created. This, Jung warned, is the dark truth most men never want to face. The woman they think they love may not truly exist. She may be the mask of their own unconscious yearning. And so Jung urged men to descend not outward into more fantasies, but inward into the depths of the psyche, where this feminine image dwells. There, beneath the surface of their rational mind, lies the anima. Sometimes gentle, sometimes destructive, she can appear in dreams as a muse, a lover, a mother, or a siren. She seduces, inspires, terrifies, but above all she demands recognition. For if a man ignores her, if he denies the feminine side of his soul, she doesn't disappear. She turns against him. You can see this everywhere, even today. Men who are emotionally numb, yet consumed by obsession. Men who chase woman after woman, searching for something nameless. Men who are terrified of rejection, yet addicted to the very fantasy that causes them pain. Jung would say these men are possessed, not by women, but by their own unintegrated anima. He wrote that a man who does not confront his anima lives under the domination of moods and caprices. He becomes unstable, haunted by the emotional forces he refuses to understand. One moment he idealizes women as angels, the next he despises them as deceivers. He swings between adoration and contempt, because he has not yet met the woman within himself. Jung's insight was not meant to accuse, but to awaken. He believed that every man must sooner or later face this feminine presence within him, not to destroy it, but to know it, to understand its voice. Because when a man stops projecting his anima outward, something extraordinary happens. He begins to see women as they truly are, human, complex, neither saint nor temptress, and at the same time he discovers a deeper connection to his own soul. But that path is not easy. It requires a kind of death, a letting go of the illusions that once made life feel safe and romantic. Jung described it as a descent into the underworld of the psyche, a confrontation with what he called the shadow of the anima. Here the feminine spirit appears not as a muse, but as a destroyer. She whispers the truths a man does not want to hear. She forces him to see the parts of himself he's buried, the weakness, the dependency, the fear of loneliness. And this is where many turn away, because facing that inner mirror is terrifying. It means realizing that the love you thought you gave was often self-love disguised, that the pain you blamed on another was the echo of your own disowned longing. It means seeing that the feminine, the mystery, the emotion, the chaos, is not an enemy to be controlled, but a force within you begging to be embraced. Jung once said, "No man can become whole without the woman within." It wasn't a poetic metaphor, it was psychological law. To repress emotion, empathy and intuition, the traits society calls feminine, is to live half a life, but to integrate them is to become fully human. He saw this in myths too, in stories like that of Persephone, the goddess stolen into the underworld, or the sirens who lured sailors to their deaths. Jung saw these not as mere legends, but as symbols of what happens when the masculine refuses to honor the feminine. The descent always comes, the chaos always returns, and only by facing it consciously can a man emerge renewed. But here's the paradox. The more a man fears the feminine, both in himself and in women, the more power it holds over him. Jung wrote that what you resist not only persists but grows stronger. And so the very qualities a man rejects, vulnerability, tenderness, emotional depth, become the shadows that haunt his relationships. He finds himself repeating the same painful patterns, drawn to the same types of women, caught in the same emotional storms, over and over again, until he finally realizes the battlefield was never out there, it was always inside. There's a story Jung told once about a patient, a successful man who could never stay in love. Every woman he met seemed perfect at first, but after a few months he'd find reasons to leave. They change, he told Jung. They lose their mystery. Jung smiled gently and said, "No, my friend, you are the one who changes. The woman never existed. You fell in love with your own imagination. That perhaps is the cruelest revelation of all, that most of us spend years trying to complete ourselves through others, instead of facing the incompleteness within." Jung called this process individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming who you truly are, and to him, integrating the anima was one of its most sacred stages, because only then could a man love not out of need, but out of wholeness. It's easy to misunderstand Jung's words about women. He wasn't saying women are deceptive or mystical beings sent to test men. He was saying that men's perception of women is shaped by what they haven't yet made conscious within themselves. To truly honor the feminine is not to idolize it, but to meet it with awareness, to see both the light and the shadow, the beauty and the pain without distortion. And yet, even Jung admitted, this work is lifelong. The anima never fully disappears, she evolves. At first she is the siren, pulling a man into the waters of his own emotions. Then she becomes the guide, leading him through them. Eventually she transforms into the soul companion, no longer a projection, but a presence of balance and inner harmony. When that happens, a man no longer seeks salvation in women. He no longer fears rejection, because he has already faced his own depths. He can love freely, without illusion. He can listen without defense. He can stand in the storm of emotion and not lose himself, because he has found at last the woman within, and she no longer needs to be chased across the faces of others. But Jung's darker warning remains. Most men never make it that far. They get trapped in the projection, mistaking desire for destiny, beauty for divinity. They either worship women as angels or condemn them as monsters, never realizing both images come from the same wound, and so they remain divided, half human, half shadow, endlessly searching for what can only be found within. If Jung were alive today, he might look at the modern world with its dating apps, its endless scrolling, its obsession with image, and sigh. Because everywhere men are still chasing ghosts. They think they're pursuing love, but they're really chasing fragments of their own forgotten souls. The truth is both dark and liberating. Women are not here to complete men. They are mirrors, reflecting back the parts of themselves they refuse to see. The question is whether a man will look or turn away, because the feminine, Jung said, will not be ignored forever. She will rise through dreams, through heartbreak, through the quiet ache of longing that no relationship can fill. And until a man learns to listen to that inner voice, to honor the mystery instead of trying to possess it, he will remain a stranger to both women and himself. Perhaps that is Jung's most haunting message, that love in its truest form begins not with another, but with the reconciliation of the inner masculine and feminine, the union of mind and soul. Only then can a man see clearly. Only then can he love without projection. Only then does he awaken from the beautiful, painful dream of illusion and begin to live at last in truth. And so the story doesn't end with Jung's warning. It begins there. Because the moment a man recognizes that what he's chasing isn't her, but the missing half of himself, something profound stirs inside. The illusion cracks. The light gets in. And for the first time he glimpses what Jung called the sacred marriage, the reconciliation of the inner opposites that make a person whole. But before that awakening, there is always a reckoning, the death of fantasy, the confrontation with truth. Jung believed that every man must descend into what he called the night sea journey. It's the psychological version of being swallowed by the whale like Jonah. It's the dark night of the soul. It's when everything you thought you knew about love and women and power collapses, leaving you face to face with the emptiness you've been avoiding. In that darkness, the anima no longer appears as a lover or muse. She becomes something rawer, more terrifying. She becomes the voice that whispers, "This isn't about her, it's about you." She shows you your need to be admired, your fear of rejection, your hunger for validation disguised as affection. She reveals how easily your ego falls in love with its own reflection. It's brutal work, this inner excavation, but it's sacred too, because only by seeing what's false can you ever touch what's real. This is the crucible Jung spoke of, the place where the boy dies and the man begins. To see women clearly, a man must first see himself clearly. To love deeply, he must confront the parts of himself that are unloving. That's the paradox of Jung's dark truth. It's not about women at all, it's about consciousness. When you strip away projection, what remains is presence. When you stop expecting the feminine to heal you, you start listening to her instead. And in that listening, in that humility, something remarkable happens. The anima softens. She stops haunting your dreams and begins guiding them. The destructive becomes creative. The chaos becomes meaning. Jung often compared this transformation to alchemy. In the old texts, the alchemists spoke of turning lead into gold, but Jung saw it as a metaphor for the soul. The lead was the unconscious, the raw, heavy material of instinct, emotion and fear. The gold was consciousness, purified through awareness and suffering. The alchemist's furnace, he said, was life itself. Every heartbreak, every projection, every shattered illusion, it all burns away what is false, leaving only the essence behind. So when Jung spoke of the dark truth about women, he wasn't condemning women, he was illuminating the psychological fire that relationships ignite. He was saying that every encounter between man and woman is an alchemical vessel, one that can destroy or transform, depending on how awake you are to what's really happening. When a man meets a woman who stirs him deeply, he stands at a crossroads. One path leads to possession, to wanting, controlling, idealizing. The other leads to awakening, to curiosity, respect and self-awareness. Most take the first path because it's easier. It's what society teaches. Win her, own her, fix her, save her. But Jung knew the second path was the only one that leads to truth. To choose it, a man must have the courage to look inward instead of outward. To ask, what in me responds so strongly to her? What is she showing me about myself? And when he asks those questions sincerely, the feminine within him begins to reveal her real face, not the goddess or the temptress, but the soul. Jung described this moment as a kind of inner marriage. The masculine principle, rational, focused, striving, finally meets the feminine principle, intuitive, feeling, receptive. They stop warring and begin to dance. Out of that union, something entirely new is born. Creativity, wisdom, depth. The man no longer seeks completion in women because he has found it within. But that's precisely what makes this truth so dark, so dangerous. It means there's no one left to blame. You can't say she broke me or she deceived me. You have to say I deceived myself. And in that admission lies both humility and freedom. Because once you see that, you can love again, not out of desperation, but out of abundance. Jung often said the soul speaks in symbols, and the anima is one of its most powerful. She appears in art, in dreams, in the faces that haunt a man's memory. She is the poetry in his longing, the tenderness in his anger, the intuition in his intellect. She is not the enemy of his strength. She is its balance. When he honors her, his logic gains empathy, his drive gains patience, his ambition gains grace. He becomes not less of a man, but more fully human. Yet even in his later years, Jung confessed that the anima never fully loses her mystery. The feminine, he wrote, is forever that which eludes complete knowing, and perhaps that's the point. To love the feminine, whether in a woman or within oneself, is not to conquer her mystery, but to live in reverence of it, to stop trying to understand everything, and instead to stand in awe. In that reverence, Jung saw salvation, not in religion or philosophy, but in relationship itself. The meeting of two personalities, he said, is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. That's the truth most men never realize until it's too late. The women who hurt them, who confused them, who challenged them, were never obstacles. They were catalysts. They were mirrors of the transformation that the soul demands. Because at the end of it all, Jung's message isn't about darkness or manipulation. It's about awakening. He wanted men to understand that the feminine within and without is not to be feared, but integrated. That real power comes not from domination, but from wholeness. When a man reaches that place, he no longer seeks control. He no longer flees from emotion. He doesn't need to prove himself through conquest or performance. He simply is, still, rooted, aware. He can face life with both strength and softness. He can stand before the feminine mystery and not be undone by it. And when that happens, when the inner marriage is complete, he discovers what Jung believed was the deepest truth of all, that love, real love, is not possession or projection. It is presence. It is seeing the other as they are, without illusion. It is two souls meeting in awareness, without trying to fix or fill one another. It is freedom, disguised as intimacy. That's the dark truth about women Jung wanted men to understand, not to fear them, but to wake up to themselves through them. Because in the end, every woman a man meets is both real and symbolic, a soul in her own right, and a mirror of the divine feminine he must learn to honor. And if he listens, if he truly listens, he might one day realize that the love he's been chasing was never lost. It was waiting quietly in the depths of his own being, asking only to be seen, understood, and finally embraced. That is the journey Jung devoted his life to revealing. The descent into the unconscious, the confrontation with shadow, the reconciliation of opposites, the return to wholeness. It's not an easy path, but it is the only one that leads a man from illusion to truth, from projection to presence, from longing to love, because in the end, Jung's darkest truth is also his most beautiful. The mystery of woman is not something to be solved, it is something to be lived. In the end, we are all travelers through the landscape of our own souls. We chase what we think we've lost, the warmth, the mystery, the other half, never realizing it was walking beside us all along, waiting to be recognized. The faces that stirred our hearts, the voices that broke them, they were not accidents, they were mirrors, reflecting the forgotten music within. Every heartbreak was a door, every longing was a teacher, every woman a reflection of the eternal feminine, not to be owned, not to be conquered, but to be understood. Carl Jung said, "The meeting of two souls is like the mingling of two waters." Perhaps that's all love ever was, not a merging, not a possession, but a current flowing through both, shaping them as it moves. Look closely at the world now, at the way the moon pulls the ocean, the way a mother cradles her child, the way silence can hold two people closer than words. That is the anima, the living pulse of the feminine that breathes through all things, soft, strong, ancient. And when a man finally stops running, when he stops chasing her in others and turns inward instead, the world becomes quiet. He begins to see clearly. He sees that the woman he longed for was never lost. She was waiting, in his dreams, in his intuition, in the gentleness he once called weakness. She was never outside him. She was the soul whispering from within. To know the feminine is to know mystery. To know mystery is to know God. And perhaps that is what Jung was really telling us, that love is the soul's remembering of itself, that woman is the mirror of man's forgotten divinity, that every relationship is a sacred mirror calling us home. When the inner marriage is complete, the outer world becomes holy, because the story of the soul never ends, it only deepens.